So in the latter part of August 2008, I traveled to Ethiopia to Kuraro. It's in the northern part of Ethiopia, and it's a drier part of Ethiopia. They get maybe 500 millimeters of precipitation or so each year, and so droughts are a real concern in that area. Kuraro is one of the designated Millennium Villages that the Earth Institute has adopted. And so consequently, we've been able to do a lot of different studies there and some research and try a few things out and see if they're applicable not only to this area but to other parts of Africa as well. So initially we traveled on the road to Kuraro, and Kuraro is located in an interesting mountainous regime. The city is actually located right at the base of the mountains, which present some interesting challenges. So some of the crops that are growing in and around Kuraro include teff, which is similar to our wheat, except it is green, and it's a very, very fine grain that they use to make bread. They also grow maize, which is similar to our corn, and hot peppers. Other cash crops or vegetables are grown as well, and then the citizens of Kuraro take these crops to a market to sell them. The real challenge here, though, is that they have a lack of transportation to take these products to a market, and so they consequently need to walk phenomenal distances to sell them. One of the major challenges in Kuraro is capturing surface water so that it can be used both in irrigation and for domestic drinking water. So capturing it and distributing it. And that's one of the projects that we're working on. And in these gullies that you see, typically water comes down after an intense rainstorm and immediately infiltrates, and there's no way to capture this precipitation or this runoff. And so the idea is to retard the flow somewhat and let it infiltrate into the shallow layers and maybe even into the deeper layers, but capture it in some capacity that later it can be transmitted to either irrigated crops to be irrigated or to the city for domestic supply. So the idea is to build these retaining walls, if you will, or riprap they're often called. It's essentially rock walls that are connected by some wire caging. And the idea is to slow down the water and let it infiltrate instead of running very quickly down through the gullies and being lost. And then once it infiltrates further downstream or lower in elevations, we can pipe into this network system and distribute it to the fields. You also see in some pictures around Kuraro domesticated animals roaming freely. They have goats and they have cows and sheep and even some camels. And although it may seem like a bit of a chaotic mix, the farmers actually know exactly to whom each of these animals belong. And you'll often see young boys that will be shepherding these animals around, and that's their full-time job. Some of them are lucky enough to go to school, but most of these young boys are responsible all day, every day for herding these animals and taking them to greener pastures. Another picture that's shown here is a small retention pond, if you will, and the idea behind these is to use these also for agriculture. And some of the things that we're working on in Kuraro is to look at water capture or water storage and for uses along different scales. So some of the smaller ponds that are called rainwater harvesting ponds are intended to be used at the very small scale, maybe for 1 or 2 or 3 farmers, whereas the gullies that were earlier described and the capture in those are to be used more for the community. And then further ideas would maybe be to design a small scale or medium scale dam that would store water, and it could be used for the whole region, and again for irrigation most likely. And the idea is as you get to bigger and bigger scales, not only can you serve more people, but the idea is that you can overcome a larger dry spell or in the hope is eventually even maybe a dry year altogether.